those present that their words and actions will be broadcast to a wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise they should leave the meeting room prior to any statements being made. Any defamatory statements made are not the position of the council and remain the individual's opinion. Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person making the remarks. And secondly, an acknowledgement to country. I would like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people here this evening. And our meeting prayer, if we could rise please. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen.
Amen.
So, councillors, I'd like to declare the meeting officially or formally open, and first item on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and as we are all in attendance and we have no request for leave of absence, we'll move to, or could we have those? No, we don't need to accept them if we don't have them. Item 2, community consultation. We have no members of the community to make representation to council this evening, so that brings us to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Could we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Inglis and Councillor Empey, thank you. Any matters from those minutes? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 4, disclosures of interest. Any councillors wish to disclose? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 11.4, which becomes 12.4, enclosed council expression of interest for council managed premises. As the matter would be discussed with my employer, Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, Crown Lands, I would like to declare less than significant non-pecuniary interest, and I will leave the chamber at that point.
Thank you. Any other declarations, councillors? Councillor Webb?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll declare a non-pecuniary, non-significant interest in 12.3. I did have I had a relationship and a trading relationship with quite a number of those people that did show interest in this particular item early in the piece, and whilst they some of them actually withdrew, I am close neighbours with one of the applicants under consideration, and I will leave the room because if I don't, I guess there would be a perception, and that's all it would be, of a conflict.
Thank you. Any further disclosures, councillors? If not, we'll move on through item 5. There's no mayoral minute. We have no notice of motion. That brings us to item 7.1. Mover, Councillor Tickle and Councillor Betts. Thank you. Councillor Tickle, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Impey.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As I did last time when we spoke about Cartwheel Way, I think it's another industrious way of naming and renaming streets and so forth, and I think Industrial Close is an apt name for a street in that area.
Thank you. Any further comments? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 7.2. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Webb, thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment?
Yes.
Councillor Wilson, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just looking for the right page 9. Just possibly a change of word, and I appreciate the insignificance of it in a way, but the wording it says if council resolves to support the variation, following wording is proposed. No dwelling shall be erected or remain erected on the burden lot unless an all-weather access way is constructed to the dwelling. It's really about the access way. I'm wondering whether it's better to say any access will require an access way to be constructed. So in other words, saying no dwelling is to be erected, rather put the emphasis on the access way. I know it's only minimal, but I thought it was really putting the emphasis on the access.
I'm sorry.
It's on page 9 and it's just above policy implications. I know it sounds clumsy, but I just, to start the wording with no access shall be erected or remain, when in fact what it's really indicating is that an access way, all-weather access way, is necessary to access a dwelling. I admit it's not important, but I just thought it was putting the emphasis where it should be.
Councillor Tickle, given that it's not
Wilson.
not in the motion, I think it's only in the commentary, and it's.
It is.
Gina, would you like to make comment?
Oh, Mr Mayor, the only thing I'd say is we're happy to take on board what councillor has raised, and it does make some sense because the focus is on the access way, not necessarily on the dwelling, so I do understand what you mean. So if the council's comfortable, we'll do a slight rewording.
So councillor Inglis and councillor Webb, are you okay with that, just that minor change? Thank you. So we'll, thanks councillor Wilson, we'll include that. Councillor Webb.
Oh, just a very brief comment, Mr Mayor, and that is I found it quite a brief and informative report. I think it's one of the better ones I've read on this sort of stuff. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.1.
Move it.
Second. Councillor Webb and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to the motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.2.
Move it.
Moved Councillor Betts and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, can I just say I'm very pleased that Fisher's Bridge is at last being done. It's one that I've followed for a long time. But beyond that, it's just amazing how much our council's devoted to upgrading timber bridges, the amount of money and and it's due to environmental changes. Climate change is also due to the way stock's transferred and the use of double bogies and all sorts of things now that increase the pressure on bridges. However, it's a really constructive, forthright, transparent document and a credit to all those that have been involved in it.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis.
Mr Mayor, just to make the observation that what this report highlights is the benefits of an amalgamation. What are we in the 17th year?
Yes.
Of an amalgamation, and we've gone from, on amalgamation day we had 67 timber bridges, we're down to 7, so we've done 60 timber bridges in 17 years, going into our 17th year. And I can absolutely say with my hand on my heart, having been the GM of one of the previous shires, and all these fundamentally are in the previous shire councils, that you'd be nowhere near that number. It wouldn't even remotely be close. And as the report rightfully says, it's the importance of those in relation to, carting produce around and some of the distances when certain bridges are down. So they are fundamentally important to the good functioning of the economy. But it just does highlight that, if nothing else, from an infrastructure perspective, amalgamations enable you to do things that previously individual councils just couldn't do in their wildest dreams.
Absolutely. Thank you. Further comment, Councillor Enby?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll echo those comments already mentioned. But I wanted to sort of say, I want to absolutely say that without people working together through the teams of council employees over a long period of 17 years, these things just wouldn't happen. And so there was a real desire to ensure that these bridges were replaced. And I think I counted, if I got it right, just looking at the map, something like 112 concrete bridges now in the LGA, which is a huge number. And comparing with what that number was back before amalgamation, it's a massive achievement. So it's really really good to see. And those people who worked on that should be applauded.
Councillor Webb.
Oh, just a quick comment, and it's about productivity in our region. And over the last number of years, we've seen quite an increase in usage of B doubles to cart grain, cart fertiliser, to cart poultry manure and cow manure from different farms and take them out into rural areas where they can be used for fertiliser. Most of our fertiliser, our chemical type fertiliser, comes up from Newcastle, Port Botany, but mostly Newcastle. The only way to affordably bring that up is in B doubles. And some of the challenges we face as a council, and I know the engineers have faced, is trying to actually get approved to state government standards some of our roads to take B doubles, because that makes the products that I'm talking about affordable to cart, makes our area more prosperous and makes our farmers more viable. And look, I've seen a report, 483 kilometres of new B double, 25 metre B double routes within our boundaries in recent years, and I think that's a fantastic thing. And a lot of that is as a result of us being able to spend a heap of day fixing bridges. And here we are getting some more money to help us fix bridges. I know we've got to do a lot of work and make contributions, but it really is building the capacity of our region to grow and prosper in a better way. Gives our industry and our businessmen in the outlying areas better opportunities to make some money, which they spend in the city. So I think it's just a good story all round. But the fact that we've got so much more B double route now around the area is just an absolute positive for Tamworth, the local government area.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
I think Councillor Webb took my words out of my mouth, but I think that 483 kilometres is about a quarter of our road length increase because of the bridges that have been done, so I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll close the debate. I thought everyone would echo the sentiments that I would have said if I did an opening statement being the mover of the motion. But I would like to just reinforce what the other councillors have said, but especially what Councillor Inglis said. Coming from Parry, Parry had the majority of those timber bridges prior to the amalgamation process, and as Councillor Inglis said, no way in the world would we have the number of bridges done now across our council area that we have been able to achieve, and I do commend that report. It's an excellent report. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There being no further comment, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.3, Councillor Wilson, and seconded Councillor Eppie. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, just to acknowledge that I'm pleased this is being adopted now. It's a valuable document. I'm also interested in, there's one of the submissions referred to Rocky Waterhole. Who's that currently under the management of? I know we're referring it on, but who currently does manage Rocky Waterhole?
Councillor Wilson, I think it's actually noted in your reports there that it is managed by LLS, Local Land Services.
Sorry, but they actually don't manage it though, do they?
They are the Crown Lands manager, yes.
They don't do anything.
Any further discussion, comments? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.4. Move Councillor Tickle and Councillor Inglis. Thank you. Councillor Tickle, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I support all those recommendations in there, and just particularly like to speak to item 3, the disability car park, additional one in Burke Street, which is very much needed. But just a point on a lot of our disability car parks, and I know that staff are aware of this, we do have a problem in that we still have a curb for the people with disabilities to negotiate. And it's all because of a lot of our streets are old and the curbs are tall and we can't get the necessary engineering requirements and the correct gradient. And there has been an audit done some time ago, but perhaps with more modern techniques and processes, I don't know. I'm just wondering if that could be revisited, because it does pose a safety risk in that the people have to get out of their car, then go in their wheelchair or on a walker or their walking stick or their crutches out in the street to the nearest pedestrian crossing, and it is a safety risk. We do have some in the central block, because it's a more recent development. We do have the gradient and the layback, because it was possible. So I guess whilst we're very appreciative of the extra car park, you still have a problem. If you don't know whether anyone's seen people struggling trying to get out and up the curb, it's virtually impossible. So just something maybe we can have another look at, into providing the possibility of having laybacks for all disability car parks, and particularly in the CBD.
We'll take that on board, councillor Tickle, and come back with some information. So, councillors, anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anybody wish to make comment? Councillor Rodder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question in relation to 05/2021, Kalala Lane and Campbell Road. Has the negotiations with impacted landholders finalised, and are they all happy?
Through you, Mr Mayor, this report deals with the Traffic Committee, and they're looking at the plan, which deals with the regulatory information around that design in terms of the line marking and the signage. But in terms of the construction project, my understanding is that the staff had extensive consultation with the residents, and again, my understanding is that there is no outstanding issues that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Inglis?
Mr Mayor, I'm not sure if you have, but that incident the other day, part of Traffic Committee, if it hasn't been raised, just encourage our delegates on the Traffic Committee to bring it up at the next meeting. And that's that issue around those traffic lights the other day, where they had, where they were out for like 7 hours or something, because you had to get the staff from Newcastle. I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I find that unbelievable that you couldn't have someone on contract here in Tamworth to, I would have thought they might have even had remote access to fix such things, but maybe it was beyond that. But the principal point being, surely there's a more efficient way to deal with incidents like that. So I just encourage you to bring it up at the next Traffic Committee.
Okay, thank you. Further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.1. Move Councillor Webb and second Councillor Inglis. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to the motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Bit of a concern, isn't it? We've sort of, a lot of councils rely on this as a good form of income, particularly for the larger councils. And I see our interest has declined by 43%. It doesn't matter if it's only $100, but it matters a lot when you're talking about millions. And with the forecast by the Reserve Bank that they don't expect any fundamental change in those cash rates till 2024, you can't help but sort of look ahead with that. So, you just crunch those numbers very quickly. So we're basically down 1.4 mil this year. As far as our 10-year financial plan goes, we would have forecasted it at those same rates. So over 3 years, that's 4.2 million. That's a gap over the 3-year time frame of 5.6 million. on probably what was our forward forecast. That's fairly serious money, so so as far as our 10-year financial plan goes, I'm not sure when we intend to start our budget workshops, but I would suggest we need to do that sooner than later, particularly with a couple of reports we've got coming up. We've got some serious sort of work to do there in relation to strategising, particularly over that medium-term period. You can always, manage things over a 12-month period, but local government's not that simple, as you know, and there's some fairly serious numbers, aren't they, in relation to forward forecasts. So, as I say, it'll be interesting to see how the 10-year financial plan's looking in our next budget. So, just to make that observation, Mr. Mayor, that's the thing. There's things happening to us, and even in our reports about coming up, there's things that have caused those problems for us that are literally out of our control. But one thing that is in our control is trying to find a solution.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.2. Move Councillor Inglis and second Councillor Impey. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just some observations, Mr. Mayor. These reports are important. I notice this one includes January as well. Then we've got the quarterly one after, which always is interesting. I noticed the pilot training facility. We haven't included that in the material differences section, but that's due to Department of Education. And whilst that's true, that's now ended. So I guess that'll get back in there in the next quarterly review. The airport operating result, another good example of something out of our control, has declined 2.7 million. Again, as I say, add that to our interest. We're talking serious dough there. Mr. Mayor, the Tamworth VIC, I see wages have gone up by 27 grand. Can I just ask about that? Like, why? Are we paying volunteers now or something like? It's a large increase for the Visitors Information Centre. Just wonder why.
The Director, what I would anticipate, Councillor Inglis, is that it would have been the redeployment of some of our staff and costing them to that centre when they weren't active in other parts of the organisation. So it would be a reallocation of resources within the organisation.
And I
Can
would
we
suggest
get it out of session? Just let us know.
Yeah, for sure.
Councillor Inglis, I'd also suggest that while the volunteers weren't actively manning the centre, we would have had staff there.
COVID.
Whatever, Mr. Mayor, just an explanation would be good as part of our role. The Bylong Road widening, can I also ask, Mr. Mayor, out of session, that we just get a bit of an update? I'm just curious where all that's at in relation, because there's a whole range of issues with compulsory acquisition. We just haven't had a report on, that's important, that Arcadia.
So we'll come back with a report on that.
Just where it's at. It can be out of session, doesn't have to be to council.
Just an update.
Just an update, yeah.
Thank you. Yep.
The Olympic pool remediation works, 81 grand. I'm curious, did that actually add to the useful life of the pool, or was that just, it's still got its same useful life? Does that help in any way?
Oh, that was just renewing some dilapidated
So
part
has
of
that
the
added to the
infrastructure.
useful life of the
I can't imagine it would.
No.
There's other issues there that'll be affect the life.
as I said, it was 81 grand.
Councillor Inglis, I would say that just gives us a snapshot of what we're looking at going forward. That's a snapshot of the future. If there's rust into the reinforcement in that particular part of the construction, it would be elsewhere too. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add to that, Councillor Inglis, I think the obvious answer is yes, it does, because if we hadn't have done it, the pool would have been shut and would have been at the end of its life.
Yeah.
So it's certainly helping us to realise the anticipated life, but as far as it sort of extending what we would have expected to be its reasonable life, no, it's only a cosmetic safety improvement, but certainly you would have basically had to write the pool off if you didn't fix it because you couldn't use it. So,
Mr. Mayor, I just asked that question in the context of the fact that I think that pool's just going to be there a bit longer than some people would like, but because the reality is about getting that funding for the other pool. So,
thank you. Further comments, or does anybody wish to speak against the motion? Any other comments? I think we see a bit of a snapshot again of what we're looking at over the next year or two. There'll be a period of recovery until we until we meet that pre-COVID level. But I'm probably also speaking out of turn because I think I'm speaking to the next item on the agenda, and so I beg your pardon, councillors. Any further comments? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. And that now brings us to item 9.3. Moved by Councillor Inglis and Councillor Webb. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, I beg your pardon. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, some observations, Mr Mayor. You look at the grants and the contributor capital increase and you think, how good is that? But I think I'm speaking on the right one. And then you look at any revenue increases we get, then they were significantly depleted by the cost of COVID and the impact it had on us, and also our actions, the actions we took, such as the developer contributor contributions that we lost about 260,000 I've got here. So actions that we took to facilitate the community's survival and progress through COVID cost us. And other things that concern me are when you look at what we've deferred or delayed or put on hold, it really is compounding the situation into the future. You think, well, we didn't spend that this year because of COVID, but it's going to compound into coming years, which will impact on new works we want to do too.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Webb.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, just a question actually to the General Manager, and we've always used our, I guess, our unrestricted cash reserve, cash as a bit of a measure or a yardstick of, you know, how we're going, and you know, we know where we're going, but across the industry, I mean, you talk to lots of people in our industry. What's the general consensus or the general feeling about other local government areas? I mean, they'd all have different levels of restricted cash, and we've got a minimum that we aim to try and maintain, and others would have different levels. But what's the feeling out there in terms of where this is going with what we've been through and what we're heading into?
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Of course, I generally speak to the other regional councils, certainly those that are part of the regional cities group, Dubbo, Wagga Wagga, Albury and so on. It's fair to say that those that have similar types of infrastructure are the ones most affected. So Wagga Wagga, for example, I don't know whether you've just heard recently that they're making noises about essentially handing their airport back to government. Other councils that don't have airports have probably not suffered as much. Those that are not focused as much on events tourism have not suffered as much. But I think it's fair to say from Tamworth's perspective, we have for a long time had a very strong financial position. And I think it's really important that people understand that when you talk about the external restrictions, which means you absolutely must spend them on those purposes because there's rules around those, that when we talk about internal restrictions and unrestricted cash, they're almost interchangeable in many ways. Certainly there are things like employee leave entitlements and so on that you can't transfer between the two. But the way I've explained it to people in the past is, if you think about our unrestricted cash as being your general savings account, so the money you use every day to sort of live and operate and so on, and then you create all of these other accounts, and it might be for a new car or a holiday or whatever it might be. The same way as a home budget works, when something happens to impact your savings account, you might have to decide to not buy the new car or not go on the holiday or whatever it might be, and transfer some of those funds into your day-to-day living. So while we're saying here that our unrestricted cash can drop to 4.7, if the council said we want $6 million in there, then we just go to those other savings accounts, those other internally restricted assets, which we have full control over, and transfer funds out of there and into the unrestricted cash position. It certainly is a measure of a decrease in your overall cash position, but those amounts are interchangeable. They're not totally reserved and not available to council.
No, thanks. That was a really good explanation. And Mr. General Manager and Mr. Mayor, I didn't actually ask for me, but I know there'll be a lot of people looking at things like this, and I don't really think that people in the general public fully understand what that might mean. So some people may see that and they read the business paper or something will come up in the media about that, and it might ring alarm bells when it doesn't really need to. So thanks for that.
Councillor, I'd probably just add, just for context, is it's really important that people understand and remember that we have a $200 million budget as well. So in the context of the size of the overall financial management that we undertake, yes, it's not a great number. You'd always want it to be better than that. But in the context, you're only talking about 1.5% sort of change.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Webb, I think it's also relevant to note that this is a quarterly budget review that we're looking at, so we've still got another 6 months of trading, and I know the staff have already been working hard on pulling that budget down, and I'd expect that by the time we come to 30th of June, I'd be awfully disappointed if that number was a much lesser number. And as the General Manager suggested, in a $200 million budget, there's lots of things that can be massaged a little just to restore that. But I guess the good thing and the comforting thing is the council's not going broke, and there's no serious financial stress here. But there is a need for us to be really mindful and manage carefully, and some of those discretionary spending things, like with our home budget, we might just have to say no to some of the requests for some of the smaller things until we can get that unrestricted cash number back to where it should be. So.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just think it's important that the general population out there, our ratepayers, our constituents, have an understanding of that, because it doesn't take much these days for people to run off on a tangent when it's not really there.
Yeah. Any further discussion, Councillor Impey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just another observation that caught my eye, and that was part of the income statement of the water fund, $773,686 decrease in income, largely as a result of the drought, and yet another element that we have no control over. And we were on level 5 water restrictions for some time, and of course that's going to mean people are using less water. Hopefully now that we're back onto less severe levels, level 1, it might improve that budget line, but just another observation that caught my eye.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. And item 9.4, Councillor Inglis and Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of observations. This is one of my favourite reports, Mr. Mayor, as you know. And it's just good to acknowledge some of the things in there. The volunteers program, hasn't that gone well since resourced and new location? But great to see. I noticed the overall winner of the New South Wales Regional Awards was a member of our 2018 Junior Council, the Regional Youth Council. So fantastic, because that's one of the reasons we established the Youth Council, to some training, leadership, looking for future leaders and some leadership skills development. So fantastic to see that. The year-round care program, I see and we discussed that previously, didn't we? The lack of available casual staff, and that's keeping the numbers down because of that. It's interesting, isn't it? You'd think that wouldn't be a problem, but obviously it is. The venues and entertainment staff, I'd like to just give a shout out, Mr. Mayor. I've been to a couple of events myself in the last couple of months, and they've done a fantastic job with the COVID restrictions. And really tried to. I went to Bangara on Saturday night, and well, it was full. It was fantastic. But the entertainment staff, they've done a great job to get us back into entertainment mode. Just on the one thing, Mr. Mayor, please, and maybe talk about it later on. But I see in the review of our economic development strategy, Tamworth Tomorrow. It's down in our program to be ready for councillor review by the 30th of September. Can I encourage you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to have a talk to the GM and the staff about bringing that forward? And why do I say that? As you know, we've got elections And I just think that next review that's an important document, and because this governing body did the blueprint exercise, I think everyone here is pretty over sort of where we're at, and I just think it would be a good idea for this governing body right now with the incumbents, with what we've been through over the last 4 years, we'll into our 5th year, in relation to that review. Whereas if there is a big turnover and lots of us aren't here, that's yeah, so just something to think about, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, I always love commenting on the DAs. For that quarter, 293 DAs, 91 million determined, and online lodgement, 71%. So that's obviously, they're getting onto that as well. But that's a pretty impressive number for the period that we're in, and the city and region should be really proud of that. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. And item 9.5. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Impey. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is one of those great landmark things, and to see us going out for an architect for the Performing Arts Centre and Precinct is just very exciting. And it means we're keeping to our timeline. However, I think we need to be really smart now, and if I can add another component to it without going into all the need that we have for this facility. We've certainly outgrown the capital. It doesn't cater now for the performers, it doesn't cater for the audience, it doesn't allow us to genuinely activate the creative ability and the cultural capacity we've got here. Mr. Mayor, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've increased an amazing amount of sporting facilities here. We've got Scully, we've added lighting to the sporting fields, we've put additions to ALEC, we've put additions to Sports Dome, we've got our athletics centre, which is magnificent. But we need to now look at actively and urgently seeking funds for this, and we need to be smart because there'll be elections this year. And if we can encourage the community to indicate that this is something that's really burning, then it becomes a political asset. We actually need to put a strategy in place to facilitate the community to start funding this facility. In the past, I think when we look at any of our major facilities, right back to the town hall, there was a huge amount of public funding went into that. With the TREC, $750,000 was raised by the community. With ALEC, there was a huge public funding contributed to that. And we need to put a strategy in place to facilitate the community to be able to contribute. They're wanting to, and we need maybe to open a fund to put some strategy that's transparent in place so that the community can hold events. There are individuals who would give that to that, but there's also dance groups, there's also performing groups who would just hang out to put on an activity where they could raise money. And that displays to our local, federal, our state member that this is high in the community's wish list. And it's got political mileage. And I just think we need to take this really seriously, make it urgent, and if we can please look at some way where we can put into place a mechanism that funding can be raised and contributed to and can be measured by the community.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the functional and technical brief that is extremely comprehensive. So I think Peter's here tonight, isn't he? I'd like to acknowledge Peter and his staff's effort. That's the most detailed document I've ever read, and if you ever do it again, do not put the room data sheets in there, please. They'd have to be the most boring thing I've ever read. But very comprehensive, a lot of work, and very meaningful in the sense of the next phase as well, because it's really shortcutting a whole lot of things, and in a way too, really contains possibilities of variations and stuff. Mr. Mayor, the challenge now, of course, is, and as it states in the documentation here, we've basically got 1 year to find funding. 1 year to confirm funding by January 2022. 2002, Mr. Mayor, as you know, is the 50th anniversary of the Tamworth Country Music Festival. It's also the 50th Golden Guitar Awards. I don't think you've got there in your civil life yet, Mr. Mayor, but the 50th anniversary of anything is known as the Golden Jubilee Year. So, Mr. Mayor, let's hope 2022 is a Golden Jubilee Year for the Performing Arts and Cultural Centre. And some wise people way above our pay grade put some money into this.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Further comment, Councillor Empey?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I think that's quite a novel idea of Councillor Wilson's to go to the community and encourage the community to be involved in this in a financial way, because I think we all know that the community are very much involved in this and engaged with this and keen for this to go ahead in every other sense of the word, and that is to see it happen. So I think that has some potential. I also think there could be a wonderful opportunity for a politician on the night of the Golden Guitar Awards for the 50th to stand there and make an announcement on behalf of the government that the new centre will be funded. Imagine the audience they'd receive. People all around Australia watching the Golden Guitar, so perfect opportunity for them to think about that. So they've got a year to work on that as well. Tongue in cheek. But anyway, I think it's the report was very long, but needless to say, well, I was actually at work this afternoon, and at 4:08, up pops an email from Architecture AU, the newsletter, one of my favourites, and there it is, the story of our Performing Arts Precinct in there, in a national newsletter. So I'm not sure whether Mr. Ross had anything to do with that, but it was good to see, because there will be people all around Australia reading that as we speak, who would be thinking, wow, Tamworth's really going ahead. If that happens, if that gets up, we'll move to Tamworth, we'll visit Tamworth, we'll invest in Tamworth. And for Tamworth to reach that 100,000 people at some stage in the future, these types of infrastructure projects has got to happen. And it's exciting to see the plans in place, both technical and design, and I hope others who are on those pay scales well above mine, also see that at equal excitement.
Thank you, Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to commend the author and the team to putting this report. I think it's absolutely comprehensive and needs to be commended. This centre is far more than just a performing arts centre. It is an income generation aspect for Tamworth now and into the future that not only will supply performing arts aspect, but it will provide many jobs. I said about $1.6 million income to the Tamworth community per year, and that'll be pretty conservative. It's got a benefit cost ratio of 1.53, which is quite outstanding for a centre such as this. So it's far more than a performing arts centre. It is an income generation centre that will put Tamworth in a stronger seat to move towards our population of 100,000 and attract people, be an iconic regional centre. And I just commend the report. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.6. Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Impey, thank you. Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Or dare to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Impey.
Just a quick one, I just think it's fantastic that we have two female councillors amongst us who are able to go along to a lunch such as that, because there would be other councils around with no females and representation of that. So I think it's, I think it's great that this type of event's being held, and we push the engagement, the involvement of women in our community. I think it's very important.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. That brings us to item 10.1. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Tickle, thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to the motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 10.2. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Tickle. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Mr Mayor, just to advise, sort of wearing my chairman of the Regional Arts Committee hat, the principal reason why we had to do the modification to this strategy, we wanted to get in and bring it up to date, as you know, with the recent acquisitions around the Hall of Fame and the country music collections and some other things. We wanted to bring that up to date because we've made a grant application for quite a sizable sum of money, and what it's about is the digitisation of the collections of the Tamworth Power Station Museum, the complete Australian country music collection, the Gems Mineral and Fossil collection that we've got based in Nundle, the Moonby Museum, the Regional Film and Sound Archive, and the Tamworth Regional Gallery. So it's a major project. Just to let you know that you might be thinking, well, how many of those things are digitised now? Very small amounts. The Australian Country Music Collection, for example, is only 2.5% of it digitised. So what does that mean? It means people can't get access in the electronic world. So even the Powerhouse Museum's only 17%. The regional film thing, zero. Haven't digitised any. It's a big job, it's a big sum of money. The staff have come up with a great idea of involving Indigenous staff as well to be put on, and it's also got a large Indigenous involvement with the local Aboriginal Land Council. So it's a fantastic program, but just to give you that background, Mr Mayor, that's sort of the reason for why they wanted to bring that up to date, because that formed part of that grant application. But hopefully that is successful, because that'll be a really great thing, because then it'll take about 2 years, but then all those collections will be available for the world basically to access.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? Motion is carried. And now, councillors, before I ask for a mover to move items 11.1 through 5 to go into closed council, I'll make an offer to any of those members of the community, public, or any members of the council who would like any of those matters brought into open council. If not, I'd like to thank the members of the media for their interest and attention, and thank you for coming. So, councillors, now could I take motion to move items, to consider those matters, items 11.1 through 5 in closed council? Councillor Inglis and Councillor Betts. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this report of the closed session of the ordinary council meeting held on the 23rd of February 2021. In closed council, you considered 5 items, 12.1 to 12.5, and for each of those items you adopted the recommendation as per the business paper.
Could we take a motion to receive that report? Councillor Wilson and Councillor Abbey, those in favour? That is carried.
I'm going to just mention two things. If there's nobody outside, don't worry about the doors. I just wanted the councillors to know that in the report around the Performing Arts Centre, we didn't include a number.